Do not start your year until you finish it. It's a Jim Rohn quote that I have expanded to fit this episode called Strategic Planning 2023. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's the podcast here, Grow with Tim, with JDew and
Tim Joyner.
Tim. Surprise. We're kind of making fun of that every single time because I get to start it off, and I've learned so much from this
Only
man.
a few of us are cool enough to have one name.
There's like Madonna, Prince, JDew.
You're in good
right?
company.
Okay.
But I really need the Joyner. It just doesn't work.
Grow with Tim. That's one name, right? We can put a hashtag on it. So we hope you're enjoying. Of course, what we do here is we talk about leveling up in your life and business career. There's so many high-octane entrepreneurs out there that we think are going to be interested in this type of conversation that we have each and every podcast episode, which is about every other week right now. So as we get down to the end of 2022, Tim, that's when we're recording this. It's time to start strategic planning for the new year.
Yeah.
Now, I brought up this quote from Jim Rohn. Many of us know Jim Rohn. We talk about him every other episode. He comes up for a minute or so. And he said, as I recall, that you do not start the day until you finish it.
Right.
Now I sprung that on you here to open up our... What do you think he was meaning about that? Don't start the day till you finish it.
Yeah, well, so I'm interested to have you unpack that because you've thought about it a lot more than I have.
Yeah, I said. I sprung it on you. Right?
So for me, your year isn't finished or your day isn't finished until you've reflected on that day and you've made sure that, number one, you've captured the lessons from it, right? Failure is only failure if you fail to learn from it. So hopefully I've learned something. Have I finished actually what I set out to do? If I had a list of 3 objectives for that day or that year or whatever, hopefully I've gotten those done, or at least I've made a remedial plan for how I'm going to get them done tomorrow or next year or whatever. And then hopefully I have now the planning the next day is I'm really not done with today until I've planned for a successful tomorrow.
There we go. That's that last line there is where I really think that his context and hopefully my question leads us toward. It's we're not going to get up in the morning and go for it and just be reactive. We have planned out what we expect to happen, what we need to happen, what we want to do. So as we conclude this year, many of you in business, including myself, are thinking about what needs to be true about next year for me to be satisfied and pumped up about where we have gone. So we do have to reflect on where we've come so far, but don't start next year until we've finished it on paper. And that takes me specifically to the strategic summit that Tim led me and my company through just this past week. We're going to talk a little bit about strategic planning in 2023. Do you do it? Why should you do it? What comes about around it? And all the crazy, funny, weird moments that came out of our summit last year because of the crazy fun, good, hopefully our Airbnb host, maybe they're listening. It was an interesting place.
It was an interesting place for sure.
Okay, so first off, Tim, take us back though. What is it? How do we go about it? When did this kind of strategic planning initiative and the summits that we'll talk about here in a second, when did they when did they get introduced to you? Why do you do them?
Yeah, so it's probably been a decade or so that I've been developing this. It hasn't always been the case. I used to just go through kind of every day as it came. And sure, I had set some goals and I'd be like, oh, it'd be really cool to hit this revenue number. But I didn't really have a plan for getting there. And even if I did have a plan, it wasn't a strategy.
Okay.
It was a plan, maybe.
So there's a difference between those two words then.
Yeah.
How would you kind of help me understand what you mean?
I think there's a whole book, Richard Renault, I think, on good strategy, bad strategy. That's very, very dry, but it's actually really rich and deep and valuable. And you can read that if you want to get an idea of what is strategy actually. But for me, a set of strategic objectives are different from a set of goals or even a plan because, number one, they're objectives. They're things that you actually want to achieve, and it's clear about either I have achieved it or I haven't, right? It's measurable.
Yeah, right. Okay, measurable.
But it's strategic in that it's not just a right thing to do, it's the right thing to do. And if you put a strategy together where you have several strategic objectives, they ought to all build on one another. And if I get this one right, it's going to help this one. If I get this one right, it's going to get the whole company wherever it is that I'm trying to get to better, faster, cheaper, more successfully, more sustainably, whatever. And so a good strategic planning summit, number one, it takes some time and some planning and some work, but it ought to result in a dramatically better next year for spending that 2 or 3 days where you're actually pursuing every day with intentionality and purpose and a plan, and not just sort of reacting all the time.
Right.
You're happening to the world instead of the world happening to you.
Ooh, I love that. So when I hear about those terminologies, I'm remembering what I've read in Jim Rohn's book about, I'm sorry, this is 4DX, the four disciplines of execution.
Yeah.
I believe the whirlwind.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, the whirlwind. Yeah. Okay, or is that Jim Rohn? Am I getting it wrong?
I don't actually know.
Jim Collins. Jim Collins. There's some.
I'm
out here, ladies and gentlemen. You have to. Anyway, I'm out here selling books. Hopefully, you go figure it out and tell me in the comments. Like, who am I talking and quoting? Okay. Yes, the whirlwind is the stuff that's going to happen in any and every day.
I think it's four disciplines of execution.
Okay,
I'm almost sure it is.
Okay. All the things that are always going to hit us and come about, but in the midst of the whirlwind they talk about, we've still got to be going toward the strategic initiatives that have to be true at the end of the day, week, month, year, to help us perform at the levels that you're kind of talking about, that growth factor. So we're actually more efficient, making more money, we live better lives because of it. And that's really, really tough, because I imagine out there, if we're not strategic about what we're doing each and every day, or we step back and reflect in something like a 2-3 day summit, the whirlwind takes over.
Yeah, the whirlwind is just life happening to you, right? How many of us have ever set a goal, whether it's like a personal goal, like I want to lose weight, or I want to eat better, or whatever, or an organizational goal, I want to build a 10 million, I want to have $10 million in revenue, or 100 million, or 1 million, or whatever your company size is.
Right.
But then, and we get all excited about it in January, right? And then a few months go by, and we haven't really done anything to achieve it, or maybe we did something for a few months, but then we kind of fell off the wagon, and we get to the end of the year, and we're like, I didn't hit any of my goals, right? A good strategic planning session, first of all, is not standalone, right? The work is not done, because one of the things that ought to come out of a strategic planning summit is, yes, 3 to 5, depending on the size of your company and a number of factors, 1, 2, 3, maybe as many as 5 strategic objectives. These are big rocks that I want to accomplish this year. But also a series of supporting initiatives with deadlines and owners. So, okay, if I'm going to achieve this strategic objective, then I'm going to have to do this project and this project and this project. And you're going to own that, and I'm going to own this, and somebody else is going to own the next one, and there's a deadline for each of those. And then, critically, we've got to have KPIs, key performance indicators, lots of different names for that, different systems call different things. I like KPI, but a metric of some kind, some number, where you can say, am I actually succeeding or failing? So if you say, we're going to significantly improve our reputation next year, then I've got to have a KPI.
Yeah, because that's kind of ethereal and out there.
Right.
So how do we know?
So maybe I commission a Net Promoter Score survey, for example, and once a quarter I survey all of my customers, or maybe every time I engage with a client, I have an automated survey that goes out or whatever, and I've got targets. Okay, we're putting all these initiatives in place, and by the end of first quarter, I want my Net Promoter Score to be X.
Okay.
And by the end of second quarter, I want it to be X plus. I want it to be a little bit higher. And by the end of third quarter, I want it to be my whatever. So I've got to have supporting initiatives that are actually like action steps to achieve that objective, and I've got to have KPIs, and I've got to report on those KPIs all the time, which is where the dashboard comes in. We've talked about that before.
I think that's so important sometimes, because in the context of getting these things done, you still need to communicate how we're doing at any given time, and it needs to be, according to 4DX, very easy for us to judge how we doing right now. When we go to the football game, right? That's always the easy one. Everyone understands American football out there, and they not all the nuances of actually the games and rules, but that's the point. Is the game and the coaches and the referees are watching a million different data points.
Right.
Millions of different data points when you factor in all the people and all the things that are going on. But the audience and the people who are on the field continually look up and see the time and the score.
Right.
They're just looking at, are we on time and how are we doing at this given point?
So I think that was one of the epiphanies for me. Is I have for years I'm kind of a data nerd. Like, I like information. I look at reports and I try to understand how my company's doing. And I thought that I was communicating that to my team.
Okay.
But every time I had like a performance review, I'd interview my key leaders or whatever, and I'd ask them, how they're doing, and I'd have all these questions. One thing that I was consistently frustrated by was they never seemed to have the vision. They never seemed to have the big picture of where we were going or how we were doing on our journey to get there. And it was so frustrating to me. And then I realized I didn't have a scoreboard. And so at a certain point a few years ago, I really experientially figured out,
Okay.
if I have a scoreboard that is published,
Right.
everybody knows, okay, here are the 4 things that matter, and here's how we're doing on each one of those, and every week we talk about it. Man, now everybody is making from all the way down to the front lines of the company, everybody is making little decisions that are going to make that score go in the right direction.
Right.
So even if you've got a scoreboard that your executive team uses, maybe you need to have a scoreboard that everybody can see. We got to
Right.
know where we're going.
And that one, I guess the more people that need to engage and interact and see that scoreboard, actually the simpler it becomes. When it's less people or the leadership, sure, they can see a lot of different data points and things like that. But as you communicate it through your company to your line workers or whatever it is that you might be dealing with, yeah, it's got to be simple.
Yep.
Look, here's how much time is left. Here's what the score is. Are we beating the other team? Right. That's what the football team is looking for.
Right.
We'll let the commentators worry about all the other nuance. On Tuesdays, when there's a full moon, then that doesn't matter to the players in the game during the 60 minutes they have to play.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
You got it. I feel like we've gotten ahead of ourselves though.
Okay.
Because we're talking about some of the outcomes and some of the requirements of it, but when we talk about strategic planning, to some people in our listening audience, they have been doing this for decades, and frankly, maybe they're better than we are. So
right.
I hope that we'll get a flood of comments and emails and conversations started around, well, have you thought about this? You actually are missing this important part. So maybe we're going to learn something today from our audience.
Hope so.
But there are some people on this that are going to be listening to this podcast or watching this video that have never really participated in a strategic summit, and they don't even know where to begin. And I remember the first time somebody told me, you've got to do strategic planning, you've got to get out of your office. I literally took a legal pad and I went to a hotel and got out of the office, and I said to myself, what the heck am I going to do for the next 8 hours? Like, I have no idea what to do.
Okay, so you committed to a full day.
I think the first time I committed to a half day. I think I had 4 or 6 hours.
It was supposed to be 8 hours.
Yeah,
it turned out to be like,
that's probably what happened.
Lunch. Right.
Yeah. No, I had no idea what to do. I knew that it was important. I was committed, but I didn't know how that works.
No,
so
on this note, I asked you the same thing. So as I mentioned a second ago, ladies and gentlemen, the strategic planning in one of my companies with Tim just finished.
Right.
And I asked you this question. I said, hey man, remind me again what we're supposed to be planning for. And you said, well, we're planning for downtime away from the office and whirlwind. We're planning for that so we can even identify what needs to go on. So I said, well, how do we do this? Does that mean we're not doing it at the office? And you said, yeah, well, let's go up to Asheville. Many of you know we live in Greenville, South Carolina. Let's go up to Asheville or something. Here's what another company has done. And I said, I mean, we love you, Tim. We're going to pay for this. But I'm not sure if we can pull that off. But you said, hey, we have to leave the office.
Right.
We got to do it elsewhere. So yeah, let's set the stage.
Right. Okay. So in this case, you guys found a really, I was going to say a really nice. It was nice. It was different.
It was very different. Eclectic is the word. So many, ladies and gentlemen, in this one conference room that had to be, I don't even know how to describe this place.
It was like a large living room. It had a couch. It had several couches. But it also had a conference table, and it had several little tables. It had a TV. It had a little kitchenette.
10 overhead ceiling fans.
11.
Were there 11?
Yeah, because one of the lines went longer than the other one. I counted them. 11 ceiling fans in what was effectively a large living
So
room.
here's what we're trying to say: is in a room with a regular 9-foot ceiling, probably 8 foot, 9 foot ceiling, 8 foot ceiling.
8 foot, yeah.
The distance between each fan was 2 feet, 3 feet.
Maybe less than 3 feet, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we did find a place.
So we found a great place, despite all the ceiling
quiet,
fans.
Away from the whirlwind.
It was quiet. It was actually quite nice.
Yep.
It was perfect. And we got snacks, plenty of snacks, because your brain needs energy, right, when you're thinking like this. And it was quiet, and it was away from the office. It was 30 minutes away or something like that. It was great. And then we spent parts of 3 days there figuring out how to make 2023 an incredible year, where we're all pulling in the same direction or rowing in the same direction, and we're all rowing on the same cadence, and we're checking it, we're communicating well, and we're actually making progress toward these milestones and toward these ultimate goals. So how do we start? We started on Thursday over lunch.
We did, and we went 2 hours, and 2+ hours, and what we were first trying to figure out was what we wanted to be true by the end of our weekend.
Yeah, so I came with, I think, 8, if I remember right. I had 8, not everyone's the same. I tried to customize it for your company.
Now our company is 3 key owners and leaders.
Yep.
So there's a small group of guys, right? We know each other well,
Yep.
and we have online service. So basically what we focus on is educational online platforms and things like that. So I know one of the things that you do, of course, is customization depending on who you're with.
Right.
So I'm not sure what it would be like in another situation, but that's who we are.
So we identified 8 categories, things like what do you want to be true about your marketing and your brand? What do you want to be true about your financial results? What do you want to be true about your products and services? And so on. We had 8 different categories. And I just asked you 3 partners, the executives that run this company, what do you want to be true about your products and services come December 31st of 2023, right?
Right.
And so you got, and then I would just shut up and let you write. And I had little worksheets and you wrote out all these different things. Then we talk about them and identify priorities and look for common themes, right? And we came up with 8 different categories, and each one had 2 or 3 things that you said, boy, if we got that done by 2023, we'd be really successful, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Way too many things, right? There's
Of
no
course,
way that we're going
yes.
to be able to do 16 or 24 or however many things that we identified as priorities.
Right. Yes.
So then we had to call those down, and we said, which of these will actually move the needle? Which ones are actually critical? And we argued a little bit. We debated. And so
Yeah,
I think that's
100%.
important
We're
to
coming
understand.
from it from different angles. We have different roles and responsibilities with that leadership team, so we're trying to come to the head.
Yep.
Like what, and of course, during this process, you'll know this, just like we found out, of course, is, well, actually, these 2 things are the same, but they're coming from different perspectives
Right.
and different responsibilities and roles. But if we did this kind of hybrid piece of that,
You
it
can combine
takes
them.
care of these 5 different things we wrote down.
So we organized all of this, and then the next morning we started early on a Friday morning and came back for day 2, and basically had all of that sort of summarized and organized and combined and redacted as necessary. And we identified a much shorter list of things that you would love to be true, right?
Right.
And then we also came with worksheets for what are the strategic objectives. It was like per objective we had 1 full page, and at the top we had a space to sort of draft out what it actually is, this objective. What are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to accomplish, we want a for example, for you guys, we wanted a comprehensive self-service training, I don't have the exact wording, but like library of educational for your
and
current
courses.
customers.
Yep.
So these are our current customers that get access to it. These are prospective customers that pay you a subscription fee to learn how to accomplish these financial objectives that they come to you guys for. So we wanted this comprehensive library. Right now you've got tons of content, but it's not all super well organized. You can't necessarily track it.
It's okay, people.
It's good.
The point is that over time, new things have been added and changed, so we have to refresh it.
And
in a way, we knew that.
Critically, you couldn't incentivize your team and your extended team of contractors and agents to actually refer people to this and like share revenue with them, right? The technology
Correct.
wasn't capable of
Yeah,
that.
and
So
we
that was
had
one
that
of the things
new-
that you identified.
We had a
Well,
new
we've
initiative
gotta-
for that.
We've got to do this, right? Another one of your objectives was to substantially simplify how you bring on new, because you guys want to scale. You want to be
We
able
do.
to bring on new people.
Right.
And instead of having to do a one-off onboarding and implementation for every single new person that you add to your team, you got to be able to do this in a semi-automated fashion and have lots of technology and systems and documentation and automation that is going to make it so that instead of growing by addition, you can grow by multiplication, right? You
Yeah,
want
exactly.
And so, anyway, the point is not to get into the weeds of what you guys decided, but we identified several strategic objectives that we said, if we're going to get to these big goals, we've got to make it easier to bring on new team members.
Yes, 100%.
We've got to make a better education library that we can use to turn prospects into clients and to turn clients into advocates, right? And there were several others. And so for each, we spent then about an hour and a half on each one of these, where we said, all right, the first strategic objective, based on all these things that we want to be true, we prioritized them and said the first one is going to be these, let's say, that I don't remember which one was actually the first one, but let's say that it was bringing on these agents.
All right, yep.
Right? And so then we identified supporting initiatives.
Okay.
If we're going to do that, if we're going to make it really simple to bring on a new team member, what do we have to do? Well, we have to have better documentation, we have to have this automation, we have all these
Yeah,
supporting
we have to have a form for them to fill out to say I'm interested.
an
And then
online form to screen them.
Yeah.
Right? With a bunch of questions so that we don't have to take the first phone call, and actually the interview process is going to be largely automated.
Yep.
Okay.
Then we need, for instance, a thing like a course for them to go through, right? We need a call one-on-one to happen. We need some sort of paperwork system. Can we upload this paperwork so they can get the documentation going down? Here's the crazy thing about this, Tim. As we're going through, what kept happening, as you probably recall, especially my brother is a partner, is we started to realize, all of us, yikes, I'm gonna have to do this. Like it's like in the middle of everything going on, like who's gonna do that? I got phone calls I'm not taking right now.
So that's workshop number 2, who, not how, right? We got to find people to do it. But anyway,
very good.
Right.
Okay,
there's responsibility there for sure. But the point is that for you guys, this was a strategic objective, because if we don't get this in place and you grow like you want to, you're going to spend all your time training new people. And you're going to have all kinds of mistakes because you're like, oh, wait a minute, I thought he already signed that. Oh, he never signed that contract. Well, he can't go into this meeting with a, right? And so you've got to have the systems and processes and technology in place so that when growth hits, you're ready for it, right? So we identified, first of all, what the objective was, and then we said, all right, these are the supporting initiatives that have to happen, and we put people's names by all of them, right? You got more of your name put down than you wanted. I think
we all did.
We all did, right? But we got owners that we're going to hold each other accountable for, right? With deadlines.
Yeah.
So by December 31st, you got, well, we said not December 31st because we didn't want to mess up your Christmas.
I tried to say December 31st.
To work all Christmas, but
right.
we scooted it up a little bit or pushed it out a little bit.
Right.
But by certain deadlines, you've got things that you're accountable for. And if you show up in an executive team meeting and that deadline is passed and you don't have anything to show for it, we're gonna have a hard time for you, right? We're gonna give you a hard time. So identified strategic objectives, and then critically, we worked on KPIs. So how are we going to measure this? Not just a pass-fail, did you automate that system, but is the system working, right? So all kinds of KPIs. So for example, we talked earlier about customer satisfaction and net promoter score. We want usage and retention. So with this client library, we're going to give people 30 days free. So critically on day 31, how many people are self-subscribing when they've got to pay? That's a metric that we identified.
Of course, right. Yes.
But we also want them to do more than just, oh, I forgot to cancel it. We want to provide such value and be in such regular contact with them that they continue to be a long-term subscriber. So we've got other metrics for retention for long, right? So anyway, we identified metrics so that we can find out not just, did I do my task, but is it working, right? And we're going to track that over the course of the year. So we identified over all of these objectives, maybe 8 or 10 KPIs, and we don't have all this built out yet, right? These are 2023 initiatives,
course,
but eventually you're going to have a dashboard, and every week you're going to say, all right, I'm responsible for these 3 guys. Here's what happened. We're ahead of the game on this one. We're behind on this one. We're right on track with this one. And then your brother is going to say, hey, here's, and then Will's going to say, and you're going to report to each other on how you're doing, and not just like throw out a number and say, oh yeah, didn't hit it, sorry. You're going to say, all right, we didn't hit it. Here's why I think we didn't hit it, and here are the actions we're going to take this week or this month or this quarter in order to get that metric back on track, right? So now all year long, we're going to be intentionally pursuing those strategic objectives such that at the end of the year, you got a really good chance of having hit all 5 of those objectives. And instead of just saying, oh, we had a good year, we had a not so good year, instead of the year happening to you, you're going to happen to your year.
A lot of that kind of helps us get on philosophical alignment of why we're here and what we're doing. Many of you out there have strategic reasons internally, actually personal things that are not even in business, on why you're in that business, what we're here to accomplish in the world and bring good to the world. And so for us, Tim, a reminder for you, man, and kind of a shout out for those of you who might be thinking of having something like this and maybe a facilitator to help you, is we're able to be in more of one accord, as they'd say in church, about what we're doing from the different personalities and people who take the leadership. And that right there is invaluable stuff.
Yeah.
Invaluable stuff.
The problem is, if you don't have this kind of alignment and communication and common goal setting and developing all these initiatives, everybody does whatever he thinks is right.
Yeah.
Right? And it probably is good. But your version of what you think is right, and we got slightly divergent visions for this company, right? And we're going to be constantly frustrating each other and disappointing each other because you're like, I think you should be spending more time on sales. And I say, yeah, no, I really need to spend more time on operations or whatever. Like, if we don't have a common vision for what our roles and responsibilities are, going to be a lot of frustration and a lot of wasted effort, right?
So I want to know a little bit now about some other folks and some other types of strategic planning that you've done and some of the results of what came above that. Who else can you help, have you helped? And I want to hear a good story.
Yeah, well, all right. So you're a lot better storyteller than I am, for sure.
Well, just embellish. We don't know.
my modus operandi is that I extract all the theory from the story and I deliver the theory, because that's, like, I want to know how to reproduce this, and you want, like, the story, and
right.
I got to get
Tell me
better
about
at
the
telling
fans.
story.
How many fans
were there?
Why was it so strange in the room?
Very strange. All right, so I'll give you an example. I came into an organization a couple years ago. I may have told this story on an earlier podcast, I'm not sure. And we knew that there was a lot of customer dissatisfaction. We were growing rapidly. This organization was killing it in sales and like doubling market share. It was great. But there were lots of complaints and lots of unhappy customers, and it seemed like they were always on the phone screaming at us. I exaggerate a little bit, not very much. Sometimes they really were screaming at us.
Yeah, sure.
And it seemed like we could never keep the customers happy. And so we tried to get a handle on that, and early on we commissioned a Net Promoter Survey, right? Some of you are familiar with the Net Promoter Score, NPS. And how likely are you to recommend us to a friend or colleague? And we got a really terrible score. I mean, it was really terrible.
Negatives.
Yeah. It was negatives.
Right.
People were very unhappy.
Yeah.
We started looking at why that was, and we noticed that, wow, we had just never, before a couple years ago, this company had never tracked how many tickets, how many unresolved issues there were on a per client basis.
Okay.
Right? We had the system to do it, but nobody was paying attention.
So we're failing at our metrics.
Well, there just wasn't even a metric there. Nobody was paying attention.
It
was like, we know that we're all really busy and we're working hard and we're trying to fix clients and fix tickets, resolve issues as quick as we can. But when we did the analysis, we found out there were 30, on average, 30 unresolved issues per client. Well, no wonder people are upset, right? It was taking, I don't remember now, upwards of 90 days on average to close a ticket. Right?
So I'm assuming that's very slow.
That's very slow.
Don't know what you guys are doing out there, but 90 days is a pain point.
Yeah. So one of the metrics that we set, we came up with a series of strategic objectives and supporting initiatives. We did a lot of analysis into where are all those tickets coming from? Why do we have so many problems? And we identified in one case that there was this particular technology that we had that kept failing. It was actually a Microsoft technology. It should have been working, but the way it was implemented, it wasn't working, and it kept screwing up.
Microsoft works.
It just works. So Microsoft, this technology was really causing us grief.
Yeah.
And so one of our supporting initiatives that year was we've got to either replace or fix this technology that's causing us all this problem. But one of the KPIs was our tickets per client, we want to get to 14 by the end of the year.
Okay. So
From
that's
30
half.
down to 14.
Yeah.
And we had incremental milestones along the way. So by the end of quarter one, we're going to be down to 18 or what, I don't remember what they all were. This is 2 years ago now. But every single week we reported to the whole team. We had a handful of about 5 metrics that we reported on. That was one of them. We also measured time to resolution. How long does it take? And we measured client satisfaction, this Net Promoter Score, and there were several other metrics that we were reporting on, market share and financial results and so on. But literally every single week we would report on how many tickets per client we had open.
All right.
And we watched them drop. And we had ticket parties where we would bring in lunch and we would invite everybody to come to this big conference room. And for a 2-hour lunch, we'd cater lunch. We were focused on closing the oldest tickets. And it would be like a war room, like all collaborating.
This is not a party, ladies and gentlemen.
Well,
this is a work.
We had food.
All right. Well, we did have food.
Constitutes a party, right?
Okay. Does it?
I mean, for me.
These are Tim's friends, people. Got it. Okay.
All right. So the whole company was focused on bringing this number down because we knew that if we got the number of tickets per client down, customer satisfaction would go up, client retention would go up. It would enhance our ability to close new deals because word was getting out. Like our reputation was suffering. People were talking and like, man, these guys have a great product, but it takes forever to
fulfill anything.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that was an example of how there were a number of strategic or supporting initiatives that we worked on. So replacing this technology was one.
Yep.
Hiring another support tech was another.
Okay.
Figuring out how to set and deliver expectations. We have this habit of
Setting expectations right, even. Yeah, I
we
like
were
that.
scared to commit to
Yeah,
anything
right.
because we were so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
We were under so much water. Like, you didn't want to make a promise because you knew you couldn't hit it.
Mhm.
Well, the problem was that if you don't set the if you don't set the expectation, your customer sets their own. And your customer, they think that a reasonable turnaround time is 24 hours, and we're thinking 90 days, and that's going to be a problem, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So you've got to communicate and set the expectation. And even if hopefully it's not going to be 90 days, but whatever it is, you've got to set it and then deliver on it so that you build trust with the client. So another initiative was how we're going to improve our communication in some specific ways and get really good at setting and delivering on expectations.
Right.
There were a number of other initiatives. But over the course of that year, we saw those tickets per client, like we graphed it out, and every week we saw it. Now, the leadership, when the 6 leaders got together,
Yeah.
your executives and directors, we went much more in depth.
Right.
Rather than
Yeah.
just report on, well, here's the number, we said, all right, here's the number, and here's what I'm doing this week to improve that. Here's how I'm investing in this system, this technology. I'm training my people this. The team that reports to me is going to work on this week.
Right.
We were strategically pursuing that goal, and we hit that number. We got it down, and actually the next year even more, and we went from 30 down to, I think last week, I'm still working with that company, I think we were down to 3.8 last
Very
week,
nice.
right, from 30.
Right.
And now there are a lot of other important things. So I'd like it to be even less than that, but it's
Sure.
a big improvement over 30.
But we've cleared the trail on some of the problems, so we can move forward on some other.
You got it.
some
And
other
now we're not
ideas,
so
right.
we're not spending
Yeah.
all our time even just figuring out which ticket's most important. Like, now you've got 3 and fraction per client. It's a lot
Love it.
easier to manage.
Yeah.
But by breaking it down, and then our team leads and directors and execs met every week to specifically say, this is what we're going to do this week to improve it. And the whole company got a report card every single Friday.
Mhm.
This is what's going on. And it was like everybody was excited about watching that number. And when we hit certain milestones, we celebrated.
Okay, a real party.
A real party.
Oh.
Well, it probably wasn't a party by yours. We should have had you to come and MC.
Okay,
You could have brought
yes.
the fun.
We'll do, but I
Next
like to
time.
eat. I like to. That's
Next time.
fine if you're an eater. So Tim, appreciate that. So tell our audience and listeners, as we close 2022, many folks are already or thinking about or planning for a better year next year, but they may have strategic holes, like
Yeah.
you said. They're planning for it.
Yep.
They're hoping and wishing maybe.
Yep.
It's a dream right now, but what can we do to close out this year strong, ready to start the next year after already having finished it in our mind? We know how it should end.
So it's going to be different for everybody, right? You got to walk before you run. So
Okay.
if you are a solopreneur, and we have a lot of those that watch this or listen to it. So if you're a solopreneur and you've never done this sort of thing before, you take a half a day and get somewhere quiet with a legal pad. I don't recommend a laptop or an iPad because there are too many distractions. Like,
Yep.
get some paper and a pen, do it the old-fashioned way, and figure out what is it that you want to accomplish next year. And then figure out what is going to have to be true if you get to the end of the year and you've accomplished it. What has to have happened along the way? Well, I'm going to have to fix this, and figure out if you've got any employees, or if you've got contractors that you can work with, or you can hire a firm. Maybe you need to fix your books, so you're going to hire an accounting firm, whatever. But you've got to get clear on paper with what I want to accomplish and what's going to be necessary to get there, and figure out some way to measure it. You may say, wow, that sounds like a lot of work. It is, but it's better than reacting, right? It's better than just floating your way through the year and constantly putting out fires. Like, figure out how to prevent the fires in the first place. So maybe that's it. If you're a small business with a leadership team, even if it's a small leadership team, and you've never done this, probably hire somebody to facilitate this. Even if you know how, having a facilitator means you can not be worried about how the day is going to go, or managing the clock, or thinking about how to facilitate this conversation, or make sure that these two execs get along because they have different... Right?
AKA getting a fight with your brother because he owns the company with you.
Right, these things happen. So having a facilitator is really, really helpful, even if you know how to do it. If you've already been doing executive strategic objectives and a strategic summit for a long time, try to figure out how to make it better. Look at what you did last year, and where were there holes? Were there holes in that you didn't dream big enough? Were there holes that you didn't have enough discipline in following it through? Did you not have enough measurements in place to even know that you were on track or off track until it was too late? Did you maybe not have the right team in place to deliver on these KPIs or whatever? But figure out wherever you are, and then what's one step to get a little closer. And probably for most of us, it means either starting this process of strategic planning or getting a lot better at it, because we can all get better at it. And without this, life happens to you.
Yeah.
I want you to happen to your year. Strategic planning and a summit, an off-site, systematic way of thinking, what do you want to be true and how are we going to get there, I think is the best way to get.
All right, appreciate that, Tim. Don't get caught in the whirlwind, ladies and gentlemen. Even from personal experience this past week with Tim, if you're thinking about needing a facilitator for this guy might be your guy. And if you need a recommendation on a spot to do it, I'm a big fan of a spot just
north of Greenville.
North of Greenville, South Carolina. All right, we appreciate you listening right here at Grow with Tim, and we're going to see you online or at your next company party to celebrate all your big wins.
And you can follow us all the channels are listed at growwithtim.com.